because I need to finish this first.
Another video. In the past, we've broken down Mists of Pandaria, an expansion of experimentation that, in addition to having wonderfully deep classes, also developed loads of important gameplay mechanics and laid out the patch template that made Legion so successful. Then we covered Cataclysm, a very troubled expansion that was beset with issues, but did manage to innovate in a few ways, even having the progenitor to artifacts and the Heart of Azeroth being left on its cutting room floor.
Yeah.
Today, though, we're going to cover World of Warcraft's most popular expansion, an expansion that brought World of Warcraft to its highest subscriber count ever, and an expansion that brought tremendous change, with its end version being wholly different from its initial one. So today and over the coming weeks, we're going to delve into what would go on to be the largest incarnation of World of Warcraft ever. Now, during TBC, WoW was still growing. It had not yet peaked. And, well, most of us are rather like WoW back in 2007. We've not came close to peaking yet. We've got all the stuff we'd love to do, all the things we'd love to learn. Today's sponsor, Skillshare. Well, it can teach you the skills that'll take you to 12.1 million subscribers. Okay, 12.1 million might be a bit ambitious, but they're an online learning community with thousands of courses, including an amazing series of Skillshare originals.
You gotta
really
throw it
high
in there
production,
somewhere.
really incredible.
It makes
Today,
sense.
I'm focusing on Ewan's course on getting, on punching above your weight.
Filmmaking? Wait, what's this?
Honestly, it's been pretty inspiring for me. It's lined up with me starting to overhaul the channel's look and feel. There are some set changes in the works. We've got the new logo. We've got loads of other new elements that you're going to see in this very video. And it's one of the many examples of me getting a lot out of my Skillshare subscription. So no matter what you do, they can help.
You're not getting a lot of content out of WoW.
The first 500
you've got to diversify.
In the description, they will get 2 months of premium absolutely for free. So, there's nothing to lose, there's everything to gain, plus I'm sure with the upcoming holidays, that'll give us all a break to focus on ourselves a bit. Also, documentary content like this takes a long time to make, so I'm very thankful to Skillshare for helping the channel and helping make it happen.
Okay. Wait, oh, they just broke down the gate.
The year is 2007, the month is August, and Wrath of the Lich King is about to be announced at this earlier than usual BlizzCon. Now, just this January, players got their hands on the Burning Crusade. Originally planned to release in winter 2006, it ended up being delayed with Blizzard citing a desire to further polish the game. Now, players were, at this stage, quite familiar with TBC, and through its multiple raids and attunements, they had went on a pretty massive journey. Gruul fell in February, Magtheridon in late February, Vash in late March, Kael'thas in late May, and then that opened up Hyjal and an insane June. Illidan fell to Nihilum on the 5th, and then Archimonde on the 9th. Now, these bleeding edge players have cleared through all this current content, but unlike in the current day, most guilds were far behind. Raid tiers lasted a lot longer, gearing was a lot slower, and tiers didn't really replace each other when new ones were released. So even now in August 2007, right before Wrath's announcement, most players had a wealth of content to progress through. World of Warcraft, of course, was still on its meteoric rise, with sub-numbers being between 9.1 and 9.3 million. And while the game would, while the growth would continue, but slow a little bit from this point, WoW would prove that it would have a long way to go. Now, this time, WoW's story was directly tied to Warcraft 3, with the Burning Crusade having us knock out many of that game's characters. Now, we all remember the end of Warcraft 3. Illidan was defeated by Arthas, and then he fled back across the Dark Portal.
That was actually a cinematic, dude.
Saw us
it was so bad, but it was all we had.
Two big Warcraft characters. So, in BlizzCon 2007, going into it, everything was pointing towards the Lich King.
Great place to tell you that the dev team's been hard at work on the second expansion for World of Warcraft, Wrath of the Lich King.
Damn. I wonder how many people were at BlizzCon back then. Yeah, I really wish they had redone the Illidan versus Arthas.
We were going to Northrend, Azeroth's frigid northmost continent that was first revealed in Warcraft 3 and then expanded upon in its expansion, the Frozen Throne, which of course is where we saw Arthas transform into the Lich King when the original Lich King, Ner'zhul, commanded Arthas to return to Northrend to defend him. That, of course, led to the climactic duel with Illidan, and then Arthas'
because Illidan was trying to become the Lich King too.
Illidan fled to Outland, and in the Burning Crusade, we defeated him. Now, as Blizzard
Look at that fucking UI.
That wouldn't be the end for the Burning Crusade raid content, with the team actually teasing what would eventually be revealed as the Sunwell and Zolaman. Now, Arthas remained in Northrend. He melded with the Lich King for 5 years, and with Wrath of the Lich King, he was ready to strike the living again. This expansion would have us sail to one of 2 starting zones in Northrend, a big departure from the Burning Crusade, which funneled
That's because everybody
had
to be in Hellfire Citadel at the beginning.
So this promised replayability, it promised more story, and better load balancing, and overall seemed like a fantastic idea. The team were aware of the Burning Crusade's narrative problems as well. Illidan just didn't hit the mark. For a character who was once a protagonist, his portrayal in-game was one note and he had a very low screen time. They did not want that to happen again. The Lich King would be a far more active antagonist.
Yeah, you never really saw Illidan or anything.
Time. Now, this dedication to his character was really exciting to people who were disappointed by the lore of the Burning Crusade and really disappointed in the lore of World of Warcraft in general. Wrath of the Lich King would forego adding new races like the Burning Crusade did, but the Death Knight, a new hero class, was a headline feature, offering players World of Warcraft's first new class and an instant level 55. Now, this is some
people, like, whenever this happened originally, nobody knew, like, what the hero class was supposed to mean. So whenever DKs were just completely fucking overpowered in the first tier of Wrath, everybody was like, is this what's supposed to happen? Or, why am I playing a warrior? Like, what's the point? They didn't even know. Yeah, they were a hero class, and they played like it too, especially at the beginning of the expansion. That was, I think, in retrospect, maybe Blizzard did that on purpose. They made DKs overpowered on purpose so that everybody would go over there and play them. It's smart.
Something that was greatly valued at the time because leveling from 1 to 55 took many times longer than it does today. Now, the Death Knight would be a unique tank and DPS hybrid with a focus on melee casted abilities, plus an innovative rune system and a unique starting experience. Being World of Warcraft's first new class, these guys would go on to have a hell of a time, so we're going to bench them for now and come back to their story later. Not adding new races also meant they could put more time into the zones. After all, the Draenei and Blood Elf starting zones, well, that was 2 zones each. Wrath of the Lich King would launch with the game's largest roster of zones yet, and in BlizzCon they detailed loads of them. The frozen wastelands of Dragonblight, the big redwood forests of Grizzly Hills, the Borean Tundra of Borean Tundra, and the rustic charms of Howling Fjord, along with its new race of Vrykul, who looked really epic, and then of course the Tuskar. So take these zones, add in the wonderful soundtrack that they teased, and you have an addition to World of Warcraft that felt distinct from the base game's offering and that of the Burning Crusade. Blizzard had one last surprise though for the world of Northrend, our capital city. For years, the mage capital of Dalaran had been a mystery to players. It was mostly destroyed in Warcraft 3,
it was just like a random circle you couldn't get into.
In World of Warcraft, but was locked behind this massive arcane shield.
Yeah.
For years, players were speculating what was there, so imagine their excitement when it was finally revealed not only that they could go to Dalaran, but that would fly to Northrend.
That part didn't make any sense.
Really strong at BlizzCon, but that wasn't
all.
Okay. They also teased new PvP features such as aerial combat, siege engines, and destructible buildings, with the latter 2 being told through Battlegrounds and Wintergrass, which would be a new uninstant world PvP zone. Then being an expansion, it would add 10 levels, complete with new abilities, new talents for all the classes. Dungeons would of course return, but they would work as both level up and endgame content due to the continuation of the Burning Crusade's super successful heroic dungeon system. We then see new raids with Jeff sort of teasing them, talking about AQ-inspired unlocks, which isn't really something that came to pass. Then Blizzard also redoubled their commitment to 10-player content. When they looked at the Burning Crusade, they noticed that Karazhan was by far the most popular bit of raid content, so they wanted to lean into that going forward. They announced much more though. The new inscription profession would let players customize their abilities, with Fireball actually having a knockback as an example.
Wait, what?
Plus some new customization features.
Well, that didn't even happen.
The barbershop would let you change
that would have been OP
for free,
as fuck.
and we're also going to get some new dances, plus the dance studio that would let us customize our own.
Wait, what was that?
Lich King, on the whole, was fantastically received. Now, I remember this BlizzCon vividly.
I would say so.
I was checking out the Warcraft radio coverage. I was glued to the WoW Insider live blogs. Overall, it was just an extremely exciting time to be playing the game. At this time, WoW was almost entirely a success story. It was on top of...
I don't think I've ever told this story before, and this goes back to the DK story, is that I got into the Wrath of the Lich King beta, and I did Utgard Keep. And outside of Utgard Keep, there was a level 68 Death Knight. And I dueled this level 68 Death Knight on my level 70 Warrior with full Brutal Gladiator gear. And I lost the duel. I was so embarrassed that I still remember it to this day. Like, it was a bad time. Okay? It was a very bad time.
The world, sure, there were dramas. The forum posts were always talking about the game dying, but for the most part, it was moving from strength to strength, and this expansion looked incredible. Of course, BlizzCon would end, but Wrath would not come out for another 16 months, but thankfully the Burning Crusade was very healthy. The design of its raid content had such tremendous longevity because of how subsequent raids did not really replace each other. And this essentially meant that it had a diverse roster of active raids, especially
back whenever the game was gaining subscribers,
which acted as a casual, friendly 10-player option. Now, this is something that they would soon dabble in again with patch 2.3 Zalaman, but 2.3 did a lot more for the game. It added guild banks, but for the most part, what players were really excited about was the leveling changes. Blizzard decreased XP requirements by 15% and increased XP gain from quests. Now, this was especially focused towards the 30 to 60 bracket.
Shit, I had no idea.
We also saw more quests being opened up to solo players, with areas like Stromgarde no longer being crammed full of elites. Now, look, 50 to 60 still was a legendary drag, but this was a big improvement for the early game, and Blizzard knew that it was something they needed to do if they wanted to put yet another 10 levels onto World of Warcraft. Oh, and this patch also revamped Duskwallow Marsh, which is a very welcome little addition. So this patch, along with the longevity of the existing content, kept players going, though all the while they knew that there would be a final tier, the one that the developers had teased during BlizzCon. So 2.4 Fury of the Sunwell was this new patch, and it brought a new island crammed full of daily quests that were unlocked on a server-by-server basis over time, a new 5-player dungeon with Magister's Terrace, and then a 25-player raid with the rock-hard Sunwell. This patch came out in May, but it would take a total of 66 days for its final boss, Kil'jaeden, to fall, going to show that this patch for regular raid teams would last for quite a while. Now, unlike future expansions such as Mists, the Burning Crusade would enjoy a successful latter half, with subscribers continuing to rise. The Burning Crusade story as an expansion, though, is one for another time,
and
because
they kept playing
while
the game.
all this was happening, the team were deep into development of Wrath of the Lich King. So the team had a number of goals when they looked forwards from TBC. TBC's questing was pretty impersonal, and it didn't really cover that much lore that well. Then looking at the zones, they realized that they wanted to return to something a bit more familiar, but done at a scale that was only possible because of their experience with Outland, as well as a number of technical improvements with the engine.
Maybe I'm actually really nostalgic about
was to bring us the story of Arthas and have more personalized questing. They focused on building a relationship between Arthas and the player.
Oh yeah, that's the guy that lied
to you.
More
personal questing did not end there.
Fuck that guy.
Many remember quest lines like Ares and Crusader Bridenbard, which, at the time, even though they had standard mechanics, proved themselves to be a cut above the rest in terms of storytelling. Blizzard's narrative ambitions also then extended to dungeons, which were now designed to tie a little bit more into the narrative
I hated
zone.
That dick sucker
Now,
of a
from
boss.
watching the old interviews and the DVD features, it was really clear that the team just were not happy with how the ambitions also then extended to dungeons, which were now designed to tie a little bit more into the narrative of each zone. Now, from watching the old interview,
there he is.
And the DVD features, it was really clear that the team just were not happy with how the narrative of TBC was told, and that they wanted Wrath of the Lich King to do far, far better. And that they
Is that Chris Metzen? Oh my god. Wow. Oh, it's Bono. Yeah. Wow.
wanted Wrath of the Lich King to do far, far better in that regard. Now, once locked in, development of zones seems to have been quite smooth. When comparing the original concept map to the finished one, you really do see that not much changed. Broad strokes, I mean, sure, shapes and layouts a bit, but overall they seem to have got the right picture. BlizzCon 2007 laid out many general ideas for this expansion, but at that point it was clearly quite early in development, especially from a systems perspective. The Death Knight, for example, only had a few abilities, and their rune system wasn't really fleshed out. Now, the Death Knight would continue to be a work in progress.
Oh, it didn't even have them there.
Of development, and also many patches and expansions after Wrath. Being a hybrid class, though, the DK was initially designed to have tank-friendly talents spread across all 3 talent trees.
Makes Jeff an emo. I can't do that.
Design. Now, the devs did end up scrapping a wacky plan that would have had you literally turn your character into a DK permanently, just like what we saw at the reveal trailer. Thematically strong and kind of cool, but yeah, probably a good thing that they scrapped
about sacrificing my warrior to become a DK.
Were a hero class, and what's quite clear is that Blizzard intended to, well, do more of them. In an interview after BlizzCon 2007, Jeff Kaplan joked about having demon hunters and archmages and blade masters, all of course based off the Warcraft 3 hero
Great
types.
idea, Jeff.
Now, personally, I speculate that these plans were greatly slowed by how long it took Blizzard to get the DK right. And of course, as a part of that, Blizzard did tell people the DKs wouldn't be overpowered, and that's not what a hero class was.
Wait, did they actually
say that? But
not
many of us really believed them, and I think we were proven right by time. So looking through the development of the initial version of Wrath, it's super clear that they wanted to make a TBC plus in terms of structure, where the TBC zones didn't have story, the Wrath ones would. Man. Illidan wasn't seen much.
Overwatch happened?
Yeah,
I mean, think about that.
Badges of Justice were successful.
Jeff went and made Overwatch, and Overwatch is fucking amazing.
A 2-tier Justice and Valor system. 10-player raiding was a massive success, so this would be integrated into the game's raid format, with Sunwell being the last 25-player only raid that World of Warcraft would ever see. Heroic Dungeons were, of course, a big success in TBC, but Blizzard worried they were a bit too hard, so they wanted them to be more accessible in Wrath. Attunements were a bit too exclusive, so Wrath
what do you mean, dude?
Up on that. They then looked at the classes of the Burning Crusade, and they started to slowly move in the direction of bring the player, not the class. A little bit less so at the start of Wrath, but you can definitely see how they attempted to smooth out the largest
Burning Crusade was a little bit overboard
the classes.
On having to bring certain
moving
classes.
on from the Burning Crusade to Wrath for a player would be quite intuitive, which really is quite different to the current game, where you generally do have to do a lot of external reading for a new expansion. Blizzard's goal really does seem to have been to deliver a more accessible and ideally more popular incarnation of what made the Burning Crusade strong. Now, do remember that many of the features that Wrath is remembered for, like Dual Spec and LFD, they just weren't implemented yet, and they would not be for quite some time. But that said, there were some other things. There was the introduction of phasing. This would let Blizzard move you between different versions of the same area, and that allowed them to have the world react to your actions. It wasn't deftly done, and it did have some downsides, but it was a massive leap forward for storytelling, allowing Blizzard to show events like, say, the Wrath Gate more viscerally through the world. We then also saw
I guess that's whenever they did do phasing,
including the more realistic shadows that we have to this day, and enhanced visual quality that, combined with their natural
rotating balls
in design experience, really left Northrend shaping up to be one of the best-looking continents yet. Blizzard also introduced new vehicle mechanics, as well as an open-world PvP zone.
I actually didn't hate the vehicles.
Lake Wintergrasp.
I know a lot of people say that, like that they didn't like it. I didn't hate them at all.
Been dropped during development, but everything else pretty much did, and this gave us our first taste of a big siege battle in World of Warcraft. But that wasn't all, because the team then went on to add PvE quest content and a miniature raid into Wintergrasp, which gave that big PvP battle some real stakes for the world. We then had UI additions. There was the Xbox Live styled achievements, which gave players a sense of progression, and more importantly, gave Blizzard a new vector to deliver rewards, and then of course the new calendar feature, which would be pretty damn handy for guilds. The WoW development team also saw some changes. Wrath actually saw now game director Ian Hazacostas join as an encounter designer, as well as the hiring of Greg Street, who of course is more commonly known as Ghostcrawler. Now look, I would be lying if I said that it all went perfectly. Azul Narub was the largest casualty of development. While it would become 2 dungeons, it was actually meant to be a full questing zone at one point. This would have been a massive departure, completely different.
That would have been fucking amazing if they made that a raid.
but for whatever reason, it was cancelled. Now, the date of this is hard to pin down because it was not announced during BlizzCon 2007.
Oh, there it is.
And Ghostcrawler did say that cutting it was like, you know, it was a big regret to him that it didn't pan out. Thing is, he was hired February 08, which means that this was probably cancelled in the latter third of the expansion's development. Whatever the truth is, though, I think it might be a while before we find out. The next major casualty is Crystal Song Forest content because, well, it's a beautiful zone. It's so unique looking, but...
Oh, do you guys remember doing the quests in that area? Yeah, me either.
But the lag caused by Dalaran would degrade gameplay too much and lead to too many server and stability issues, which is why the zone is pretty much barren of things to do. Then finally, while the barbershop...
People used to have such bad computers in Wrath of the Lich King that they would have to make sure to not look in the general direction of Dalaran, or it would just brick their computer. It would just stop working. You just look at Dalaran, it's like looking at the sun, and it just blinds you.
Did make it in, the announced dance studio did not. Many were sad about this, and you know, I can completely see why. That said, I don't think it's
anybody was disappointed about the dance
studio.
So
development seems to have went quite well following from BlizzCon, and players were actually kept happy with Zolaman and Sunwell, with the Wrath beta test beginning only a few months after the first Kil'jaeden kill. Now, Wrath's beta seems to have been a resounding success, with the press consensus at the time basically being that, yes, this is still very much World of Warcraft, but it's the best version to date, with Blizzard's greater attention to detail in the questing and the zone design really shining through on first impressions. Then, of course, shortly after that, the release date was announced, along with the announcement of the pre-patch. This is a pre-patch that would be like no other before or since. Patch 3.0.2,
the zombies,
Echoes
dude.
of Doom, released on the 14th of October,
the
2008.
zombies.
And things were quiet for a while. People were in town enjoying new talents like Titan's Grip, and they were seeing what their class changes felt like. They were customizing their hairstyles for free at the new barber.
That was actually the only thing that I did in the new patch, is I went over and I changed my character's hairstyle, and I was like, okay, that's it. We're ready for Wrath. That was the only thing I needed to do.
Quite normal, but then the Lich King attacked. The zombie plague is easily one of the coolest events that they've ever done, just like the accidental Zandalari Blood Plague before it. Now, this impacted the massively multiplayer world of Azeroth. It sent the inhabitants into a crisis. It began 3 weeks before Wrath launched, and initially it was small. Plagued grain arrived at Booty Bay, echoing the events that kicked off Warcraft 3. Infected players
I love this, man. This is so fucking
but it
fun.
wasn't a major problem initially until it suddenly
I don't know why people get so mad about
grain,
this, too.
along with roaches, arrived at capital cities. More and more players were being infested once they logged in, and even worse, the Argent healers, who would remove the plague buff from players, they began to disappear, and then the gestation period of the plague went down to a mere minute. Soon, cities were infested, but as this happened, players got a quest called Desperate Research. It would lead them to Shattrath City, so rumors began to spread of a cure to this plague, but the cities would remain infected for days to come. And this was such a special time to be playing. You were seeing groups of players fighting off the plague, being pushed back, and being overwhelmed. People were retreating to safe hideouts, and it was just amazing seeing a virtual world react to a plague, react to something completely
People got really
catastrophic.
upset about this shit, too.
Was this sustainable? No. But was it unique and interesting and worth doing? I think absolutely. Now, the Lich King had more in his arsenal, and shortly afterwards, the cities came under attack by frostworms and undead soldiers with big, floating necropoli dominating the skyline. It was quite the image, and it could not have set up Wrath of the Lich King better.
I forgot all about that. The
With the pre-expansion event finished, we only had to wait until launch day, which meant that every day...
Yeah, no, my mom actually almost quit the game over the zombie invasion. She's like, if they have this for one more week, I'm gonna quit this game. I'm sick of going to the auction house and dying. There was one time a zombie ran me down, and I knew what he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing, and he killed me anyway. She was fucking pissed. Like, that was probably the only time that I ever saw my mom legitimately mad about WoW, besides the Dire Mall incident.
Leading up to the 14th of November felt longer and longer.
I watched it happen, too. Like, she'd target a zombie that was a player, and he'd be like, hey. And then she'd try to get away from him, but he'd just get her anyway, you know, because she didn't know what she was doing. It was pretty fucking funny. Longer
than the last. But eventually, that day would come. Wrath of the Lich King would release.
I never did it.
And this would kick off a period of intense change for the game, as WoW transformed itself, setting up many future successes, but also future failures, and also reaching its highest point ever. So, join me next week where I'll go into depth on the launch of Wrath, what the game was actually like to play, how its systems worked, and what made it distinct both from the game as it is now and what Wrath would develop into by the time 3.3 rolled around. So, thank you very much for watching this video. I love putting the documentaries together. They take a long ass time, but it does just let us go back and I think bring some of the history of World of Warcraft to the front when, you know, it's a game that's so old and most of the people playing now, you know, they probably haven't seen these expansions, so I think it's just so interesting to talk about this stuff. So, yeah, there you go. That is part 1. Subscribe for part 2, which will be next week, and this will be continuing throughout December. I really hope you enjoy it. I've loved making it. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.
It was a good video. It was. Wrath of the Lich King, like, if I look back on it, there were a lot of legitimately, like, great things about Wrath. And while I do believe very firmly that Wrath of the Lich King was the beginning of the end of the game, and I think that it set the stage for all of the bad problems that WoW has nowadays, I legitimately feel that way. A lot of people think Wrath is like this great, amazing thing, etc. To me, it was good, but I think there was also a lot of mistakes that were made at the same time. I absolutely do feel that way. Okay, let's see if I'm going to get a good item here. All right, here we go.